All right, we continue looking at the conflict between the US, Israel and Iran and its impact on the world. Now, at this point, we want to shift our focus to its impact on aviation, as hundreds of flights are being cancelled by the minute as the world faces what is now being viewed as the worst travel chaos since COVID. Joining us for a discussion on this is CEO George Mothema from BASA. That's the Board of Airline Representatives of South Africa. Very good afternoon to you, George. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, this travel crisis, as you've heard, is being likened to what the world experienced during COVID. The cancellations are coming in thick and fast. Thousands of passengers are now stranded. Just your take on what is unfolding and its impact on the industry.
No, thank you very much. Indeed, I really do agree with those that would obviously resonate this with the COVID situation. When you look at the Middle East as it is, just looking at it from a South African point of view, we've got about 4 carriers of ours, Emirates, Qatar, SAA, as well as Etihad, that are impacted. But the Middle East, over the years, from an aviation point of view, created a hub system where most of passengers connect through either Doha, Etihad, or through Abu Dhabi, or through Dubai. That in itself, if you look at it, it impacts on the whole world as it is. It's not just from a South African point of view. So you've got that broader multiple or replica effect of having a particular hub system that impacts on the entire aviation. That's why you would see the kind of impact that you would have, cancellation all over the world. You can imagine a number of people that have booked their flights through Dubai, Doha, or via Abu Dhabi.
Now, let's zoom in just on the impact on aviation in South Africa. We've been reporting already in the early hours of this morning that South African travel agents have been struggling to get travelers out of the Middle East. One agency actually spoke to my colleague, revealing that they've managed somehow to get out at least 148 travelers. But many are going through Saudi Arabia. As you say, mostly it would have been the Doha, Etihad. But now it seems that many are preferring the Saudi Arabia route, maybe from Saudi to Europe and then out of there. But is it better at this point for travelers to wait it out or keep looking for those other routes to get out of the Middle East?
So my advice would be very simple. Just purely based on the escalation that we see, it's always in the best interest of the passengers to find a different path to get out of the Middle East. We're sitting on a day 3 as it is. We've seen what the Iranians are saying, and as well as the American, in terms of escalations. And those escalations would mean that this can be protracted for a longer period. And therefore, for those passengers that can be able to afford, the challenge is obviously affordability in that regard, because the airspace of other continents are not closed. So you'd have to then find a way of getting out of the Middle East into Europe and then getting back into South Africa from a South African point of view. Hence, I said, one of the things that I've said is that the travelers that are stuck in South Africa, those that were simply using Dubai and Doha and Abu Dhabi as a means of connecting into Europe or other regions, have the opportunity of redirecting, obviously, their flights directly into those destinations. It's an expensive exercise as it is. It is a huge cost for airlines because you can imagine once you start having to look at redirecting the path of your flights and all that, because you can't fly in a particular space that is closed, the costs become huge as well.
It's quite important that you mention now that probably the most wealthy will be able to get out of the Middle East, because reports are suggesting that right now it is the uber wealthy that can get out, but they would have to, as stated, go through Saudi Arabia to Europe. And it seems that a ticket at this point for a private jet could cost you around $350,000. That's most certainly too much for many people.
No, certainly, definitely. And I think what it then does, purely from a South African point of view, is that then it's a call for a crisis. You have to look at it on that basis. What we've seen already is that what Abu Dhabi has done, as well as the Civil Aviation Authority from Dubai, was really to extend, catering, accommodation, and food for those passengers, tourists that are stuck in those cities. We may have to do the same. And I think from a South African government, we will urge government, obviously, for those South Africans that are obviously in Dubai, Doha, and all those other regions. That's where the international relations will have to step in and say, how best do we then assist our own citizens from that angle? Because obviously the cost cannot be manageable from a passenger point of view.
Most certainly, it would be at a significant cost. But if we just had to zoom in on Dubai itself, it's the world's busiest international hub. It's been closed for a third consecutive day. Some analysts have just stated that, frankly, there's no other way to characterize what we're seeing now. It is a crisis within the industry. You know, I just thought of the number of crews, pilots that are now scattered across the world, which would even complicate just the resumption of flights. That if everything ended now, there was a de-escalation, the resumption of flights, whenever the airspace opens, would also be quite a problem. Just talk us through the granular details of what a process to resume would look like.
It's unimaginable, as you can rightly say, because I mean, from a planning point of view, you would have to go back to the basics, and the basics would require that obviously you have to look at just the number of passengers that are stuck in different continents. You can think about the likes of your Emirates and all the other international airlines that have to bring people back into Dubai to connect into different countries. So that in itself is a crisis that would have to be managed quite differently from an airline point of view. The costs are significant from an airline point of view, if you can imagine, because the fact planning the cabin crew, planning pilots, engineers, and all that are stuck all over the world. As it is, it's unimaginable. So the costs are going to be huge for airlines. We obviously are looking at having to find a way to recover out of this as an industry.
No, most certainly quite a mammoth task ahead, and one that reminds us that conflict is never truly confined to the warring factions. We're seeing now that ever so often, whenever there's conflict around the world, it will somehow impact the world at large. George, thank you very much for joining us on the program. That's CEO George Mothema. He's CEO for BASA. That's the Board of Airline Representatives of South Africa, speaking to us there.